The air on Kepler-12c was still and silent, a dry cold that seeped into everything. Jihyun stood at the entrance to the great ruin, her suit's external thermometer reading a steady -10 degrees Celsius. The sky was a perpetual twilight, the system's star a distant, dull coin. Before her, the Kelder structure rose from the gray rock, not with sharp angles, but with smooth, flowing curves that looked like frozen waves. It had been discovered 50 years ago, and after decades of study, it had given up no major secrets. It was a beautiful, empty shell. Her boot prints were the only ones in the fine dust leading to the site. The rest of the team was back at the main habitat reviewing data from orbit. Jihyun liked these quiet moments alone at the dig face. It felt less like a cutting-edge xenoarchaeological site and more like what she had dreamed of as a girl. Simple discovery. She was here for a final check before a new team of Thalgorn scientists arrived next cycle. The Galactic Consensus wanted a fresh perspective on what was now politely called a stable site, a place with no more surprises. She moved inside, the beams from her helmet lamp cutting through the deep shadows. The walls were smooth, a pearlescent material that seemed to swallow sound. The path sloped down, deep into the moon's crust. Her destination was the only room that had ever sparked a flicker of excitement, now long faded, the Rune chamber. Min-Soo was already there. He was often there. While Jihyun looked at the big picture, structure, layout, purpose, Min-Soo looked at the details. He was bent over his portable scanner, its soft blue light playing over a section of the far wall. He didn't turn as she entered. "Find anything new?" Jihyun asked, her voice loud in her own helmet. Min-Soo shook his head slowly. "No. Same patterns. Same inert mineral compounds. The consensus database has 14,000 matching images from 14 different species surveys. All the same. A door with no lock. Or a lock with no key." His tone was not frustrated, just factual. He had a quiet patience that Jihyun admired. She walked to the center of the circular room and turned slowly. This was it. The great mystery. Every inch of the wall, from the floor to the high, domed ceiling, was covered in symbols. They were elegant, interlocking shapes that seemed to flow into one another. Some looked like spirals, others like branching trees or constellations. They were carved with impossible precision, but they were just there. No light, no vibration, no energy signature, just very old, very pretty carvings. The Galactic Consensus had tried everything. The Nelvari had sung to them in harmonic frequencies that could shatter glass. The Thalgorn had pulsed low-energy seismic waves through the stone. Other species had used concentrated light, magnetic fields, even directed thought. Nothing. The chamber remained dormant. The leading theory was that the Kelder had died out before they could finish whatever this chamber was meant to do. It was a masterpiece of a lost art, a beautiful end of a story. "I think they're looking for the wrong thing," Min-Soo said softly, straightening up. He tapped his scanner. Every test assumes an advanced technological interface. A button, a code, a frequency. But what if the key is simpler? Simpler how? Jihyun walked over to him, looking at the runes he had been scanning. "Biological," Min-Soo said. He pointed to a close-up scan on his screen. "See the microstructure of the groove here? The stone is porous at a nanoscale. It's designed to trap something. Not an energy pulse, but a physical substance. A gas, a liquid, perhaps a breath." Jihyun smiled inside her helmet. Min-Soo's ideas were often poetic. A breath? You think the Kelder, a species that might not have even had lungs, built a lock that opens to a breath? The protocol forbids breaking atmospheric seal for a reason. We could contaminate everything. "I know the protocol," Min-Soo said, turning back to the wall. "But we have followed the protocol for decades, and nothing has happened. I am just saying the answer might not be in our technology, but in us. In our biology." Their comms crackled. It was Taeshik, their site security lead, from the habitat. "Jihyun, Min-Soo. The orbital scan shows a minor tectonic shift in your sector. A small moonquake. Probably nothing, but stay alert. We're reading increased particulate movement in the upper shafts." "Understood," Jihyun replied. She looked at Minsu. We should finish up and head back. Let's get the final surface scans of the eastern wall. As they worked, a low rumble, more a feeling than a sound, traveled through the floor. A fine powder of ancient dust sifted down from the high ceiling. The moon was stirring in its sleep. That's more than particulate movement, Minsu said, a note of tension in his voice. The rumbling grew. A sharp crack echoed from the hallway outside the chamber. Jihyun's balance shifted as the floor beneath her jerked. She stumbled sideways, her arms pinwheeling. Her shoulder hit the rune-covered wall with a solid thud. A sharp pain shot through her collar. At the same time, she heard a sickening crunch hiss from the neck ring of her suit. A warning light flashed red on her visor display. Atmosphere breach. Panic shot through her. The sterile, ancient air of the chamber was mixing with her own suit air. She could hear the faint hiss. Instinct took over. She pushed herself away from the wall, gasping as her suit's oxygen compensator struggled. The suit was trying to seal the tiny crack, but the integrity was compromised. In front of her, right where her helmet had struck the wall, the intricate symbols were fogged with the sudden, warm moisture of her own panicked exhalation. Ji-hyun. Minsu's voice was sharp in her ears. He was moving toward her, steadying himself against the quake. My suit! It's breached, she managed to say, trying to control her breathing. She stared at the fog on the wall, already beginning to fade. It was just a patch of condensation, like breath on a cold window. Nothing more. The quake subsided as quickly as it had begun, leaving an echoing silence. Minsu reached her, his gloved hands checking her suit's neck seal. It's small. The repair nanogel is already working. You'll be okay. Jihyun nodded, her heart still pounding. It was just an accident. A minor suit breach. It happened. She looked back at the wall where her breath had fogged the ancient stone. The runes there looked no different. Of course they didn't. They were just dead symbols on a dead moon. Let's go, she said, her voice steadier now. We need to report this. As they turned to leave the chamber, neither of them looked back. So they did not see the faint, deep blue glow beginning to pulse within the grooves of the stone, starting precisely where her breath had landed. It was a light so faint it was like a memory of light, awakening after 500,000 years of darkness. The first spark in the dormant chamber had been lit, not by a song or a thought or a tool, but by a simple human breath. The journey back to the main habitat was tense and quiet. Jihyun focused on the steady rhythm of her own breathing, listening for any change in the hiss from her suit. The repair gel had sealed the crack, and her suit's atmosphere was stable, but the warning light remained a soft, persistent amber on her visor. It was a reminder of the accident. A minor breach was a serious report, a blemish on her safety record. Minsu walked beside her, his usual calm replaced by a watchful silence. He kept glancing at her, then back at the path behind them, as if expecting the chamber itself to follow. The gray corridors of the ruin felt different on the return trip, not just empty but watchful. The habitat airlock hissed open, welcoming them into the bright, warm, recycled air. As they removed their helmets, the head of site security, Taeshik, was waiting. His face, usually relaxed, was set in a firm line. The suit telemetry alerted us, Taeshik said, his eyes on Jihyun. A Class 1 atmospheric breach. In the rune chamber itself. He didn't say it like a question, but like a statement of a deep failure. It was the moonquake, Jihyun said, her voice sounding raw. I was thrown into the wall. It was an accident. Protocol exists for accidents, Taeshik replied, but his tone softened slightly. You are uninjured? A bruise. Nothing more. Good. You will both need to file incident reports. The Thalgorn science delegation arrives in 2 days. They will want to know their predecessors' final actions were contained. He gave a short nod and walked away to the control hub. Contained. The word hung in the air. Jihyun felt a flush of shame. She was a professional. She had allowed herself to be knocked off balance. Minsu touched her arm gently. It was not your fault. The seismic reading was minor. The reaction was stronger underground. He paused. But there is something else. While you were stabilizing, your suit's external biosensor recorded a transient spike. From the wall. Jihyun looked at him. A spike? What kind of spike? Minute thermal change. And a localized atmospheric shift. Right where your breath made contact. He lowered his voice. The stone absorbed something, Jihyun. And it reacted. A cold feeling that had nothing to do with the moon's surface crept down her spine. That's not possible. 100 scans, 1,000 tests. Nothing ever reacted. No one ever breathed on it, Min-soo said simply. Everyone followed the protocol of patience. No direct biological contamination. We treat the past as a museum piece behind glass. We look, but we do not touch. We certainly do not breathe. He led her to the small data lab, a room cluttered with screens and humming processors. He called up the data from her suit, overlaying it on a 3D model of the chamber wall. There it was, a tiny, sharp pulse of heat, a fraction of a degree, lasting less than a second. It coincided exactly with the moisture from her exhale contacting the porous stone symbols. It could be a coincidental energy release from the moonquake, Jihyun argued, but the evidence was clear on the screen. The thermal spike was localized to a hand-sized patch of runes, not the whole wall. Perhaps, Min-soo said. He did not sound convinced. He pulled up the vast galactic consensus archive on the Kelder. It was filled with elegant theories about their energy-based technology, their possible psychic evolution, their advanced material science. Nowhere did it mention biology as a key. Biology was considered a primitive, messy thing to most advanced spacefaring species. Tools were clean. Thoughts were pure. Breath was incidental. Think of it, Min-soo continued, his eyes alight with the idea. Every species that tried to awaken the chamber used something outside themselves. A tool, a machine, an energy field. They projected their will onto it. But what if the lock was not meant for a will? What if it was meant for a signature, proof of life? Not just any life, a specific kind. Jihyun sat down, the weight of the idea pressing on her. A biological lock. You're saying the Kelder built a door that only opens for a living key. A breath. A warm, moist, complex biological exhalation, Min-soo corrected. Full of water vapor, carbon dioxide, organic compounds, unique microbiota. A cloud of information about the breather. A signature impossible to fake with a machine. It is the simplest, most fundamental proof of a certain kind of life. The kind that faces its environment, adapts, and perseveres. The implications began to unfold in Jihyun's mind, slow and vast. If it were true, then the chamber was not a dead end. It was a test that every elegant, advanced species in the galactic consensus had failed because they had overthought it. They had searched the stars for complex answers, ignoring the simple, living one right in front of them, in their own lungs. We have to go back, she whispered. We cannot, Min-soo said. Taeshik will lock down the site until the Thalgorn arrive. Our access is suspended pending review of the incident. Besides, he added, looking at the data spike again, if we are right, we have already done it. The key has been turned. We just did not stay to see the door open. They both stared at the screen, at the small, glowing point of data that challenged decades of interstellar archaeology. The rune chamber was no longer just a dormant puzzle. It was a question that had, perhaps, finally received an answer. And the answer had been a human, gasping for air in a moment of panic, leaving a trace of herself on the ancient stone. The silence in the data lab was no longer empty. It was filled with the echoing possibility that they, humanity, had accidentally spoken a password lost for millennia. Taeshik's order was firm. The site was off-limits. For Jihyun and Min-soo, this meant a painful wait inside the humming, sterile environment of the main habitat. The incident report was filed, dry and factual. It listed a suit breach due to seismic activity. It did not mention Min-soo's thermal spike. He had kept that data separate, a private file on an isolated drive. Sharing it now, without proof, would sound like a desperate fantasy. The next 36 hours crawled by. Jihyun tried to focus on routine tasks, cataloging old sensor logs, but her mind was in the chamber. She replayed the moment in her head. The jolt, the impact, the hiss of air, the fog on the wall. It had felt like a mistake, a violation of protocol. Now it felt like a key turning in a lock no one knew existed. Min-soo spent the time buried in data. He cross-referenced every biological analysis ever done on Kelder sites. He found hints he had never considered significant before. Traces of complex organic residues in other doorways, always dismissed as later contamination. Designs that suggested airflow was part of their architecture, not just climate control. He built a quiet, compelling case pixel by pixel, but it was all theory. They needed to see the wall. The arrival of the Thalgorn delegation broke the tense quiet. Jihyun watched from an observation window as their heavy lander settled on the pad, kicking up gray dust. The Thalgorn moved with a slow, deliberate grace. Their bodies were silicate-based, their skin having the color and texture of polished basalt. They did not wear environment suits, only simple cloth over their sturdy forms. The thin, cold atmosphere of Kepler-12c was of no concern to them. They were led by Baran, a scientist whose reputation for thorough patient analysis was known across several sectors. Taeshik greeted them formally. After the introductions, Baran's voice, a deep rumble like stones grinding together, came over the habitat speaker. "We have reviewed the final reports of your team. We understand there was a minor incident. The site integrity remains." "It does," Taeshik confirmed. A small suit breach was immediately contained. "The Rune chamber is undisturbed." Baran gave a slow nod, a gesture learned for dealing with more fragile species. "Good. We will begin our baseline assessment. Our methods are non-invasive. We will map the mineral resonance of the entire structure. Perhaps what your soft senses missed, the stone itself will remember." There was no insult in the words, only fact. But Jihyun felt a surge of urgency. The Thalgorn would scan everything. They might find the residual energy signature Min-soo had detected. Or, worse, they might trigger something else with their seismic pulses, claiming the discovery for themselves and the wider galactic consensus, missing the simple human truth of it entirely. She found Min-soo in the data lab. He was watching a live feed from a security camera in the chamber's antechamber. 2 Thalgorn were there, setting up large, disc-shaped devices on tripods. "They will be scanning in 1 hour, Min-soo said softly. "Once they have the data, it becomes consensus property. Our observation, our moment, becomes a footnote." "We have to tell Taeshik," Jihyun said. But even she heard the doubt in her voice. "And say what? That we think human breath is a magic key, based on a 1-degree thermal spike? He would revoke our site credentials completely. We would be sent home." He was right. They needed proof. Real, visible proof. The kind you could see with your eyes, not just on a graph. An idea formed in Jihyun's mind, reckless and clear. "The maintenance airshaft," she said. "The one that runs near the chamber's outer wall. It's narrow, but it's not monitored. It comes out at a utility ledge just above the chamber floor." Min-soo stared at her. "It is a confined space. It is not rated for personnel. And if we are caught, if we are right, no one will care how we found out," Jihyun interrupted. "If we are wrong, we are just 2 humans who panicked about losing their discovery and did a stupid thing. But we have to know, Min-soo, before it's too late." The look in his eyes shifted from caution to resolve. He closed his data files. "We will need a portable light, and a camera. Not a suit camera, a small one. The airshaft is too narrow for full suits." This was a greater risk. The habitat's atmosphere was safe, but the ruins were not sterile. Still, the chamber's own air, while ancient, was breathable, just incredibly dry and cold. They would be breaking every safety rule. But the protocol of patience had given them nothing. It was time for a different approach. They moved quickly. They changed into thin thermal clothing and sturdy gloves. Jihyun tucked a small, powerful light and a thumb-sized camera into her pocket. Min-soo carried a handheld atmosphere meter. They waited until the shift changed. when attention was on the Thalgorn welcome briefing. The entrance to the maintenance shaft was a simple, unmarked panel in a low-service corridor. Min-Su pried it open. The space beyond was dark, a vertical tunnel just wide enough for a person. Cold air sighed out of it. They climbed down fixed rungs, the metal freezing even through their gloves. It was a 10-minute descent in total darkness, their world reduced to the next rung and the sound of their own breathing. That sound, the very thing they were testing, seemed loud in the tight shaft. Finally, a dim light filter from a vent grate below. They reached the bottom, crouching on a small service ledge. Through the grate, they could see the rune chamber. It was empty. The Thalgorn equipment was set up but not yet active. The symbols on the walls were dark and silent, just as they had always been. From this high angle, the room looked like a giant, empty bowl covered in strange writing. Min-Su checked the atmosphere meter. Thin, cold, but breathable. High in inert gases, low in oxygen, but sufficient for short exposure. Ji-hyun's heart hammered against her ribs. This was it. She pushed against the vent grate. It gave way with a soft metallic sigh, swinging open on quiet hinges. A wave of even colder air washed over them. They lowered themselves silently onto the chamber floor, their soft boots making no sound. They stood in the center of the room, the towering, rune-covered walls surrounding them. The spot where Ji-hyun had fallen was to their left. In the dim light from the open vent shaft, the symbols there looked no different. Now, Min-Su whispered, his voice full of both fear and wonder. Now we see. Ji-hyun took a deep, steadying breath of the ancient, dry air. She walked to the wall. This was not an accident. This was a choice. She leaned close to the stone, to the same runes that had fogged before. She closed her eyes for a second, then exhaled a long, warm, deliberate breath onto the carved symbols. Her breath formed a faint, fleeting cloud on the stone, just as it had before. For 3 long seconds, nothing happened. Then, a soft, blue pinprick of light appeared deep within the groove of a spiral symbol. It was the color of a distant star. Pulsed once, gently. The blue light did not fade. It held steady, a solitary star in a dark stone sky. Ji-hyun stood frozen, her breath still hanging in the cold air. She watched as the single point of light began to move. It traced the carved groove of the spiral, traveling along the ancient path as if following a map only it could see. Where it passed, the stone itself began to glow with the same soft, deep blue luminescence. Min-Su let out a sharp gasp, the sound loud in the silent chamber. He stumbled closer, his handheld camera raised, its tiny light now pointless against the awakening wall. "It's propagating," he whispered, his voice filled with awe, like a circuit being completed. He was right. The light from the first rune reached an intersecting line, and the blue energy pulsed down the new branch. Then another and another. It was not a sudden explosion of light, but a deliberate, patient awakening. The symbols began to illuminate one after another, in a sequence that felt less random and more like a sentence being spoken. A single word stretching across the entire wall. The light reached a large, central symbol above them. This one did not just glow. It flashed brightly once, and a low hum filled the chamber. It was a deep, resonant sound that vibrated in their bones, not through the air. The floor trembled faintly under their feet. The other walls, which had been dark, suddenly bloomed with their own networks of blue light. The entire chamber was now alive, a symphony of silent, glowing patterns. "It is a language," Min-Su breathed, his eyes wide behind his glasses. "Not just symbols. A living, reactive language." And it recognized the key. Ji-hyun took a step back, her mind struggling to process the scale of what they had done. This was not just a local reaction. They had woken the whole room. The proof they wanted was now blazing around them, impossible to hide. A wave of exhilaration was quickly followed by a surge of panic. The Thalgorn sensors, they will detect this energy surge from the antechamber. We have minutes, maybe less. Min-Su nodded, his scientist's mind switching to a frantic pragmatism. He pointed his camera everywhere, capturing the patterns. We need to document as much as we can before they arrive. The sequence of activation. It is data. It must mean something. But the chamber had more to show than just pretty lights. The central symbol pulsed again, and from its core, a beam of blue light shot out horizontally, not as a laser, but as a flat plane. It stopped in the middle of the room. Then more beams from other major symbols joined it. They began to weave together, creating a three-dimensional image that shimmered in the air. It was a galaxy, not the current galaxy but a map. Stars shone in unfamiliar constellations. A soft, melodic chime echoed, and a path of brighter light connected a series of stars, forming a dotted line that looped and curved across the stellar map. At the end of the path, a single symbol glowed more brightly than the others. A complex rune they had never seen before. A star map, Jihyun said, her earlier fear swallowed by wonder. They left a map. A new sound joined the hum. It was a voice, but it was not a sound heard with ears. It resonated directly in their minds, clear and calm, speaking in pure concepts that their brains instinctively translated. It was the voice of the chamber of the Kelder. The test is passed. The lock is undone. The voice was neither male nor female, old nor young. It was simply knowledge. We designed this interface to remain dormant. It awaited a specific biological signature. A signature of resilience, of a species that breathes a complex mixture, that carries the memory of water and struggle in its very exhalation. You are not the first to find this chamber, but you are the first to be of the correct lineage to open it. The image of the galaxy shifted. It showed a vision of the Kelder, not as gods or monsters, but as tall, slender beings of light and subtle motion. They were not building weapons or palaces. They were planting gardens on dead worlds, stabilizing dying stars, building gentle, looping pathways between the stars, the very paths now highlighted on the map. We transcended the need for physical forms. In doing so, we left behind our works. This galaxy is a garden. The pathways are its trellises. But a garden needs caretakers, not masters, not owners, stewards. The lock was designed to open only for stewards. Your breath proves you are alive, you are adaptable, you are of the garden. You are the inheritors of the quiet work. The mental voice began to fade. Its message delivered. The glowing map remained, hovering in the center of the chamber. The coordinates were clear. The gift was given. Then, the main door to the chamber, which had been sealed for millennia, slid open with a deep, grating sound of stone on stone. Standing in the doorway, silhouetted by the corridor lights, were Baran and Taeshik. Baran's stone-like face was unreadable, but his posture was one of complete stillness. Taeshik's expression was a storm of shock, anger, and confusion. His eyes swept from the glowing walls to the hovering galactic map, to Jihyun and Minsu standing in the middle of it all in their simple thermal gear, without suits. For a long moment no one spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the ancient chamber. Baran took one heavy step forward, his deep voice breaking the silence. You have activated it. He did not sound accusing. He sounded profoundly surprised. The seismic sensors detected a massive energy signature, a new form of resonance. How did you achieve this? Jihyun looked from Baran's puzzled gaze to Taeshik's furious one. She knew there was no point in hiding the simple truth anymore. It was written in the blue light on the walls, given life by the most basic human act. She took a shallow breath of the cold, ancient air. We didn't use a tool, Baran, she said, her voice surprisingly steady. We used a breath. The silence in the chamber stretched out, thick and heavy. The soft blue light from the walls painted everyone in cold shades. Taeshik took a step forward, his face tight. You entered a restricted site without authorization. You broke containment protocol. You compromised a priceless artifact. His voice rose with each sentence, echoing slightly in the domed room. Before Jihyun could answer, Baran raised a heavy hand. It was a gesture for pause. The Thalgorn scientist's eyes, like dark chips of obsidian, were not on the humans. They were studying the glowing symbols, tracing the paths of light. Then they moved to the shimmering galactic map still hovering in the air. He walked slowly towards it, ignoring Taeshik's anger. "A breath," Baran rumbled, repeating Jihyun's word as if tasting it. He stopped just before the holographic stars. "Explain." Minsu found his voice. He held up his small camera. "We have data from the first incident." The wall absorbed a minute biological sample from Jihyun's exhalation. It caused a localized thermal reaction. "We theorized the interface was biological, not technological. We came to test the theory. A theory that required breaking every safety rule we have." Taeshik snapped. "What have your rules given you in 50 years? Minsu asked, a rare sharpness in his tone. He pointed at the magnificent living map. The rules gave you a dead room. A breath gave you a galaxy." Baran's head turned slowly from the map to Minsu. "Your species' breath is a complex chemical plume. Water vapor, carbon-based compounds, microbial life. It is inelegant, messy." He said it as a fact. The Kelder were masters of clean energy and pure thought. Why would they use such a primitive key? "Because it can't be faked," Jihyun said. She walked to the wall, near the still glowing spiral where it all began. "A tool can be stolen. A frequency can be copied. A thought can be imitated. But a breath, it's a signature. It proves you are a living, biological being. A being from a world of water and air. A being that struggles and adapts." She was repeating the chamber's own message in her own words. They weren't looking for the most advanced species. They were looking for the right kind of life. Stewards, gardeners. You can't garden a universe with a laser. You need hands. You need breath. Baran considered this. He reached out a thick, stony finger towards the hologram. It passed through a star cluster, causing ripples of light. "This map, these pathways, they are not theoretical. They match known cosmic strings, natural subspace filaments. But this chart suggests they can be stabilized, made into roads." He looked at Jihyun, a new light in his dark eyes. "This is not a weapon or a treasure. It is a responsibility." Taeshik, standing apart, was caught between his duty and the undeniable reality glowing before him. The anger was still there, but it was now mixed with a dawning, uncomfortable awe. "This changes nothing about your actions. The consensus will have to be informed. There will be an inquiry." "There will," Baran agreed, his voice a low vibration. "But the priority has changed. The artifact is no longer dormant. It has delivered a message. The message is now the property of all. But the method of its delivery," he turned fully to face Jihyun and Minsu, "is unique to your species. That is a significant fact." The meaning was clear. Humanity, the newcomers, the young primates of the galactic community, had done what no one else could. Not by force or superior tech, but by a simple biological truth. It was a humbling type of power. "We need to record everything," Minsu said, his practical mind returning. "The map sequence, the exact symbols, the mental message. Before anything degrades." Baran nodded. "You will proceed. Taeshik, you will secure the perimeter. No one else enters. I will contact the Consensus Science Council directly. The news must come from us, here, now. There must be no confusion or rumor." Taeshik hesitated, then gave a stiff nod. Protocol was still his world, and Baran's order was within the chain of command. He moved to the open chamber door, speaking quietly into his comms to lock down the area. For the next hour, Jihyun and Minsu worked with Baran. They used their small camera and Baran's more advanced scanners to capture every detail of the holographic map. The Thalgorn scientist was meticulous, asking them to repeat every word of the mental message. He listened to their description of the Kelder's vision of stewardship, his stony face unreadable. "The Nelvari will find this poetic," Baran said at one point, almost to himself. "The Thalgorn will find it logical. Others will find it threatening. You have unlocked a door that many believed should remain sealed. The balance of the consensus will shift." "We didn't want to shift balances," Jihyun said, feeling tired. We just wanted to know the truth. The truth often shifts balances more than lies do, Baran replied. His scanner beeped, indicating the map data was fully stored. The hologram in the room began to fade, the symbols on the walls slowly dimming their glow. The chamber was returning to its quiet state, but it was no longer dormant. It was sleeping, its message delivered. As the last light faded from the central symbol, Baran turned to them. Your breath key is a profound datum. It suggests a compatibility with the Kelder legacy that other species lack. The consensus will want to test this. They will want other humans to try. But you two, you are the first. Your names will be attached to this moment forever. Be prepared for what comes next. It will not all be wonder. He left them then, walking heavily back to the habitat to make his report. Jihyun and Min-Soo were alone again in the near-dark chamber. The only light came from the open vent shaft above. The air felt different. Not just cold, but charged, as if the echoes of the map and the message still lingered. He's right, Min-Soo said softly. Everything changes now. Jihyun looked at the wall where her breath had started it all. It was just stone again, but she knew what lived within it. Yes, she said, but maybe that's what the Kelder wanted all along. For someone to finally come along and change everything. News traveled faster than light through the quantum-entangled comms network of the Galactic Consensus. By the time Jihyun and Min-Soo had returned to the habitat, taken their medical checks, and submitted their formal statements, the galaxy was already beginning to react. The initial response from the Consensus Science Council was a mix of shock, skepticism, and urgent curiosity. A high-priority data packet containing Baran's scans and their testimony was dispatched. Within hours, replies began to filter in. The tone was clear, verification was required, and the humans were to be isolated from the site. A joint oversight team was sent to Kepler 12c. It included a Nelvari diplomat named Yuna, whose fluid, graceful movements and large, dark eyes seemed to take in everything at once, and a stern Thalgorn adjudicator named Goran, who was all sharp angles and silent judgment. Taeshik was placed under their command. Jihyun and Min-Soo were confined to the habitat's common area. It was not a prison, but it felt like one. They could watch through the viewports as new ships landed, as teams of different species, some insectoid, some gaseous in containment suits, some crystalline, marched towards the now famous Rune chamber. Every one of them was following the new, strict protocol. A human must be present for any activation attempt. The first test was simple. A young geologist from Mars named Choi was brought in. Under the watchful eyes of Yuna, Goran, and a bank of recorders, he was suited up and led to the chamber. He stood before the wall, nervous. He took a deep breath and exhaled onto the symbols. A soft blue glow appeared. It traveled a short way along the runes, then faded. The chamber hummed very faintly, but no holographic map appeared. No voice spoke in their minds. A partial activation, Yuna noted, her voice like water over stones. The key is recognized, but the lock is already open. The message has been given. It will not repeat. Goran turned his stony gaze to Jihyun and Min-Soo. So, it is not all human breath. It is specific human breath. The breath of the first. The initiators. The chamber acknowledges you as the prime keyholders. This distinction sent new waves through the consensus. It wasn't just humanity. It was these humans. They were not just discoverers. They were, in the eyes of the ancient technology, the chosen stewards. This made many factions deeply uncomfortable. Private briefings were held. Jihyun and Min-Soo were brought in separately and asked the same questions again and again. Did they feel any different? Had they received any hidden knowledge? Did they feel a sense of ownership over the Kelder legacy? We feel like archaeologists who found a lost library, Jihyun said, over and ever. We don't own the books. We just open the door. But not everyone saw it that way. On the third day, Yuna came to them with a more somber air. The political situation is becoming complex, she confessed. Some species who have long studied the Kelder feel bypassed. They see humanity as an accident, a biological fluke that got lucky. They argue the legacy should be managed by a committee of elder races, not by the newcomers who literally stumbled upon it. And the map? Minsu asked. The wormhole paths? Being analyzed by the best astrocartographers in the consensus, Yuna said. The initial findings suggest the Kelder map is not just theoretical. Points to real, navigable structures. Whoever controls access to those pathways would hold tremendous influence. The argument is about who that whoever should be. That evening, a broadcast from a distant sector played on the common room screen. A representative of one of the elder races, a being of flickering energy, was speaking to the galactic media. This is not a human story, the being crackled. This is a galactic story. To allow the catalyst of discovery to dictate the future of the discovery is emotional, not logical. The breath key is a curiosity, a trick of biology. Governance is a matter of wisdom and experience. Jihyun muted the screen. The words felt like a cold dismissal of everything they had experienced. The wonder, the voice of the Kelder, the profound sense of responsibility. They're afraid, Minsu said quietly. They built a system where advancement and wisdom come from technology and long life. We just proved that the most advanced lock in the galaxy opens to something primal, something every human has. It doesn't fit their story. It makes us unpredictable. Taeshik entered the common room. He no longer looked angry, just weary. They've reached a decision, he said. A mission will be sent to the first coordinate on the Kelder map. A joint mission with crew from the major species. A show of unity. Jihyun felt a flicker of hope. That's good. It is, Taeshik agreed. But there is a condition from the Oversight Committee. You two will not be on the primary mission vessel. You will be on a separate observer ship with myself and Goran. You are to have no direct access to the new site until it is deemed secure and fully understood by the committee. The hope died. They were being sidelined. Their role was being reduced from stewards to souvenirs, the humans who started it all now to be kept at a safe distance. Minsu's shoulders slumped. Jihyun just stared at the floor, a bitter taste in her mouth. They had awakened a new future for the galaxy, only to be told they were not qualified to help shape it. Yuna, who had followed Taeshik in, offered a gentle, apologetic gesture with her long-fingered hand. It is not a permanent state. It is a precaution. The galaxy is adjusting to a new idea. Give it time. Your part is not over. But as they looked out the viewport at the flurry of activity around the moon, at the ships of species who now debated their fate, it felt very much over. They had breathed life into the symbols, but the story that followed was being written by others, in languages they were still learning to speak. The chamber's message of stewardship felt farther away than ever, locked behind a new kind of door, one made of politics and fear. The journey to the first coordinates took 3 weeks. Jihyun and Minsu spent it on the observer ship, a small vessel that trailed behind the majestic, multi-species flagship like a silent child. Their world was a few small rooms and a viewport. Taeshik and Goran were polite but distant guards. The excitement of the discovery had been replaced by the dull ache of being a footnote. The flagship, named the Concordance, arrived first. Initial scans of the target location were broadcast to all ships. It was not a planet or a station. It was an asteroid, a dark, irregular rock floating in the silence between stars. On its surface was a single, smooth structure, smaller than the Rune on Kepler 12c, but made of the same pearlescent material. And on its only visible door were the now familiar Kelder runes. The mission commander, a respected Nelvari elder, gave the order. A team assembled at the door. It included scientists from the Thalgorn, the Nelvari, and 2 other elder races. They tried their tools. They used harmonic resonators, energy matrices, and focused thought projectors. The runes remained dark and inert. The door stayed sealed. On the observer ship, Jihyun and Minsu watched the live feed in silence. They saw the frustration on the team's faces. They saw the commanders on the Concordance conferring, their body language tense. "They will ask for you now," Taeshik said from the doorway, his voice holding no pleasure, just certainty. The call came minutes later. It was Yuna, her image on their screen. Her large eyes were serious. The interface is identical. It does not respond to any consensus technology. The committee requests your presence on the surface. To attempt activation. It was not an apology. It was a necessity. A small shuttle carried them down. The feeling was strange. They were not in exploration gear, but in simple pressure suits. They were not leaders of a mission. They were a tool to be used. The landing bay of the Concordance was full of beings of all shapes, all watching them as they were escorted through. The silence was heavy. They were taken to the airlock where the surface team waited. No one spoke. Baran was there, and he gave them a slow, single nod. It was the only welcome they received. The asteroid's surface was pure black, the star's cape above breathtaking and cold. The Kelder structure was a simple dome, the rune-covered door set into its side. The elder species equipment was still set up around it, useless. The mission commander, the Nelvari Elder, floated forward. You will attempt the activation. Follow all instructions given by science lead Baran. Jihyun looked at Minsu. He gave her a small, tight smile. They had come full circle, back to a door that would not open. But this time everyone was watching. They approached the door. The runes were exactly the same. Jihyun's heart pounded. What if it didn't work this time? What if the chamber on Kepler 12c was the only one? What if they had been truly lucky, and now they would fail in front of the entire galaxy? Baran's low voice came over her suit calm. Proceed when ready. There were no more instructions. No one told her how to breathe. That was the whole point. Jihyun reached up and unlocked her helmet seals. A warning chirp sounded in her suit, which she ignored. She lifted the helmet off. The air of the asteroid was thin and bitterly cold, striking her face like a slap. It was breathable, but just barely. She took a sharp, involuntary gasp. All around her, the other beings watched, some with curiosity, some with clear discomfort at this messy, biological display. She stepped right up to the door. She could see the fine, perfect grooves of the symbols. She thought of the Kelder's message. Not owners, stewards, gardeners. She leaned in and exhaled a long, steady stream of warm, living breath onto the cold stone. For a second, nothing. Then, a familiar blue spark ignited in the center of a rune. It spread, faster than it had on Kepler 12c, as if this door had been waiting. The light raced along the grooves, outlining the door's frame. The hum began, a deep, welcoming sound. With a silent, smooth motion, the great door recessed and slid sideways, vanishing into the wall. Warm, golden light spilled out from within, illuminating the gray dust at their feet. No one moved. Everyone stared into the open doorway. Jihyun turned around, her face cold, her breath forming a small cloud in the vacuum. She looked past Baran, past the mission commander, to all the assembled species on the comm screens and in the landing bay. Her voice was clear on the open channel. The door is open, she said. The garden is this way. She put her helmet back on, not waiting for permission. Then she turned and, with Minsu at her side, took the first step inside. The interior was not a control room or a vault. It was a vast circular space. One wall was a transparent dome looking out on a breathtaking nebula. The other walls were living panels showing forests, oceans, and deserts from worlds unknown. In the center was not a machine, but a pool of clear water with green, leafy plants growing at its edges. The air was warm and smelled of soil. It was a place of life, of quiet growth. A library of ecosystems. A sanctuary. The other species slowly entered behind them, their awe palpable. The Thalgorn touched the leaves of the plants with a surprising gentleness. The Nelvari closed their eyes, listening to the recorded sounds of alien birdsong. Baran approached Jihyun and Minsu. He looked from the garden around them back to them. You were right, he rumbled. It was never about technology. It was about life. Your simple human act. It was the master key all along. Jihyun looked at the thriving plants, at the stars beyond the dome. The Kelder had not left a weapon or a throne. They had left a home, and an invitation to care for more. The politics, the fear, the committees, they felt small and far away in this place of simple, growing things. The message was now undeniable. Humanity's role was not to rule, but to begin. Their breath had not just opened a door. It had started a conversation with the universe, a conversation that was now just learning how to say hello. And as the different beings explored the garden together, for the first time without argument, it finally felt like a conversation they were all meant to have.